Hi guys, Mike here. This episode finally starts off Milestone 2. After all the time we have spent setting up our project in the last videos. So in Milestone 2 we will create all necessary user widgets, C++ code and blueprints to be able to register an account, log in, create and delete characters, change the color of a character, and then finally select the character to start the game with. In this video we will start by importing the mannequin and setting up the login map, and finally create the C++ and blueprint classes for the login, game mode, and login player controller we need. But before we start all this, I want to show you a glimpse of what we are creating in Milestone 2 in a small demo. And before we start, there is one thing I want to mention before we go through all of that, and I might repeat this several times later on. There will be a lot of coding ahead, and there will be episodes where we cannot test what we have created because other dependencies are there that we still need to create first before we can hit the play button and test our creation. So I will try to create videos for related topics that we can then create in one go, like for example the login and register functionalities. And here we cannot create register first and test it, but we also need to create the login screen before we can really implement register. And I will show what I mean in the demo shortly. I just wanted to tell you guys beforehand that during the course of the Milestone 2, there will be videos where we start creating code and user widgets and stuff like that will be finalized in other videos following those ones. But let's get started by having a look at what is to come next. So here I opened up my testing project where I kind of like create everything beforehand, test things out, and here you can see we have the login map with the mannequin that then will be used for characters that we create, change the colors, and you can see like we have the user interface widgets for selecting character, register, login, the loading screen, create character, and so on and so forth. And the blueprints like for the login stuff, the login game mode and the login player controller that we need for that. And you can see here in the world settings, we made a game mode override with the login game mode and which has the login player controller. And like we will always do in this series is creating C++ classes first as a base and then create blueprints on top of them that we then assign in all of these game modes and assign the widgets. So this is something that you might have seen in my other series like the Endless Runner and the blueprints to C++ stuff, where this is the way to go, create a C++ base and use blueprints on top of that. So let me show you what I've been doing so far. So before I hit play, let's have a look at the open world management console. And I created a new test account for the series, which uses a different email address and create and register different users for that and creating characters. So I created like a first character and registered a new account with the application. I will show you this in a few seconds. So when you register an account through that trial website that I showed you, then automatically a character test is created. So this is something that we are not going to use. But when we implement the register widgets and stuff, then we can use this to create a new or register a new account through that. And this is what I did. So with the test@darkstar.com email, which is completely, you can use whatever email you want, doesn't matter. So just for better purposes, not using your real emails. And then I created through the create character screen a character, and I will show you this. So this character, basically that first one that is created while registering your account through that trial website, this one, leave that alone. And for our purposes, we register new accounts through the application. And how to do this, let's change over here. And I hit play. And you can see the login screen pops up where you enter the email and password. And once you log in, then it opens up the, let me type in and log in. You can see there's that character that I created. Then you can create a new character, change the color, and remove the character. I will show you that in a second. Let's hit stop for now. And let's have a look at what I meant with that. Before we can do register, we need the login screen. So you can see like we have login register. So this needs to come up first. And then we can click register, and then you can enter your name, the email, password, which then you can log in here. So this is what I'm trying to say, is that there are some things that we need to implement first. Maybe not all the functionality like the login button and what we need for that, but get this functionality down first so that we have the login screen, then we can click register our account, and then can log in with that. And the same thing with the select character screen. So if we log in again, and the same thing goes like when we logged in with the select screen, where we then can create new characters, remove a character, change the color. This is also necessary to implement first, that we can again create each of these dialogues that will pop up when we click the buttons. For example, like let's create a new character. So choose a character name. Let's call it Thancred, for example. Create that character. And then you can see like we have two different characters, and I can then select a color, make this one red, for example. So Thancred will be red, Orange will be green, and so on and so forth. And we can then remove a character. So this is basically what we are creating in Milestone 2, so that we will be able to log in, register an account, create a new character, and let's create a new one, for example. Let's call this Alphino, for example, create. And you can see we have 3 characters created. There are some small bugs that I'm still trying to figure out, or that we will have eventually, but this is basically it. So if we stop this for now, so this was a kind of glimpse of what we will be doing in the next videos. And so you've seen that for now we need that mannequin, we need to set up a plane that he doesn't fall through, and so on, and basically create the login player controller, which will be an essential part of it, but we're not implementing all features yet, and the game mode that we will have or need, and create the structures similar to what you see here, where we have the user interfaces for login, all the widgets in here. Then our blueprints are under blueprints, and then login. There will be like the core game instance that we all, I think, created in the last video too, and later on, and that OWS character that we need, which will change in the future when we add abilities and create a real base character for that. Right now, this one really inherits from the OWS character itself, but we will create our own C++ base classes for those that we can then add our custom abilities and attribute sets and so on and so forth. So that was the glimpse of what comes in Milestone 2. Now it's time to open up our own project and start by importing the mannequin. And so before we go into our project, let's first have a look at the management console, and you can see that here now we have all the 3 characters that we created, the one that I had before and the other 2 characters. And there's more stuff later that you can change here, custom data and so on. We will go in all of that, classes, abilities, when we really get into our abilities and create the real game systems. So let's head over to our project. So inside our project, the first thing that we are going to do is importing the mannequin. So let's prepare our folders for that. So under game assets, let's create a new folder, call it characters. And under characters, let's create a new folder, call it mannequin. And the way we can import this is by adding the third person template and then only using the stuff that we need and deleting the rest. So let's add, click the add button, add feature or content pack. We just use the blueprint features, third person, add it to the project and close this dialog. So you can see it added the third person, the mannequin and that stuff. So basically all that we need is the mannequin folder, and it imported, messed up our folder structures by adding all that stuff. So we don't need this. Let's just do this by deleting all of those. We don't need geometry, force delete. We don't need the meshes here. Delete, force delete. And we don't need that stuff. Delete it. And then let's move both folders, the animations and character, to the one that we created here. Move here. It now moves all those files. And then there's one thing that you might not know about, or maybe have seen it several times and wonder what this is. So when you move usually files from one directory to another, and there might be references in other files to that asset or to these assets. In this case here, we deleted all the references, so there are no redirectors, but usually Unreal creates those redirector files that highlight basically or leaves it in the old location and highlights for the references that reference these files where the new location is. But this usually means that sometimes these files are left there, or the folders, and you really want to create a clean structure. So what you usually do is right click and fix up redirectors in folder. And usually what you can see is if there are redirectors, you have this filter symbol, and under other filters, you can enable show redirectors. And by clicking the button on and off, you can see it. So if there would be redirectors, then you would see them. And fixing that so that you can delete the folder, for example, if there were redirectors there, you say fix up redirectors in folder, and then these are gone. And then you can basically delete the folder and it's gone. So this as a side note, as a tip, if you sometimes move, let's say, stuff to other directories and you're wondering why the directory is still there, or you have problems deleting the folder, there might be redirectors in there that are created for other references that reference these assets that were moved, so that they still find them in the old location, and using those fix-ups, then they will be deleted and the references will be updated. So usually when I delete stuff, then I go in, like for example in the content, or just say fix up redirectors and stuff, so that our hierarchy is still working and that then there's no leftover stuff in here and deleting things. So like I said, this as a side note. So we imported the mannequin, we have our character here, the mesh that we need, the animations and the animation blueprint that we are going to need. So as a next step, let's create a blueprints folder. So under Docstar, new folder, call it blueprints. Under blueprints, let's create a new folder, character. And here, what we will do in the character, we need to now create a blueprint, which is temporary. Right now for Milestone 2, we will create our own character, like I said, with a base class and so on. So, but first let's create a blueprint class and click on all classes and find OWS character. You can see OWS character is the base class for the character with abilities that comes with OWS, and basically what we're doing in Milestone 3 probably, we are creating our own character with abilities, our base class with our own attribute sets and so on. So now for this purpose of creating our login and create character screens and so on, we will use the OWS character as a base. Select this, call it BP underscore character or OWS character for now. Save it, open it up, and you can see here we have our capsule component and the mesh. So we click on mesh to be able to now select our skeletal mesh, which is the SK mannequin. You can also select the female if you want. And then we need to adjust the values. So this will be -95. Put them down there. Then we need to rotate them. Let's say 270 degrees like this. And what we then need is, because we are using animation blueprint, we are using the third person animation blueprint, but later on when we create our own characters, we will also create our own animation blueprint with a C++ base class and so on, so that we have the logic in there, functions in C++ and so on. So if you have seen my Endless Runner series, that's what I created there, like an animation blueprint with a C++ base class and so on. So we will all do that later down the road. So now we can save, compile. Now we have our character. Then we can go into login. And what we can do now is add all the components that we need. So we need a directional light and a player start and a plane. So let's create them first. So under light, let's click directional light, then create player start and create shapes plane. And then drag the character in here. So we have now the character, directional light, plane, player start. Let's adjust the values. So for the directional light, under details, let's change the values. So I have 610, 250, and 420. I'm using all these values from the original OWS login map, so that we can just use this as a base for now, and all this stuff will change later on. We will have a better looking login screen, character select screen, create custom characters, or rather using the Paragon characters, selecting between them and so on. So this is all a system that we will create in a future milestone. For now, we just use simplistic things so that we can get the functionalities down and worry about details and eye candy later. So for the rotation, we have -45. Next up is the plane. So the plane will be scaled by 17, my lucky number, and on a position of -90, -110. The player start will be at -470 and the C value 22. And then our character will be at 10 and 0C and has a rotation of 180. So that if we, for example, hit play, you can see he's now standing there, not falling through. But what is a little bit distracting is the white plane. So let's create a simple material, black material, so that we don't see the plane and it seems like the character is standing in midair. So this gives us a good opportunity to also create our folder for the material library. So create a new folder, call it material library. And this is also like temporary, so just put it in here in the root. We create a new material. call it m_plaque. Open it up. And what we need to change is, the shading model. So from default lit, select unlit, and then we need to add an emissive color, for example. So what you can do is hold down the 1 key and left click in here, and it creates like a constant scalar that we can then hook up into emissive, for example, but it's still black. So I will go all through this when we create materials and stuff later down the road. Let's just create this black material that we can save and then add to the plane so that it appears dark. And so now we hooked up our mannequin into the login map. Let's save this, save all of this. And before we close this video, let's create at least some C++ classes that we at least did some coding. I know I promised coding in the next videos, but this is also like some setup that we need to do. But let's create the game mode and the player controller so that we could at least set up our game mode override and add the player controller to the game mode. So under MMO core C++ classes, you can see under public we have our game instance. And what we can do actually is let's create under blueprints. We didn't do that the last time, so under blueprints, create a new folder, call it core, for example, and under here, create a new blueprint class, and under all classes, search for MMO game instance. Select this and call it BP_MMO game instance. Save that with Control S, and then let's hook this up so that we have this already for later use down the road. Under Edit, Project Settings, you remember under Maps and Modes, we added the login map so that it always starts. And what we can do is under Game Instance class, now hook up our game instance, which will be the one instance that is created once during game start and lives through all the map. So it won't be deleted when you load different maps like the game mode would be. The game instance is always there and can be accessed through some utility classes. So we just select our BP MMO game instance, and saving is automatically here. So now we set up our game instance class, and what we can now do is under the MMO core C++ classes, right click, new C++ class, select all classes and search for game mode. So what you probably used to is selecting the game mode base, but we're actually selecting game mode, which behaves a little bit different. And like you can see here, game mode is a subclass of the game mode base that is for multiplayer stuff or has more features for multiplayer and so on. So we use this one, click next. And then what you can see here is MMO core, our plugin that we want to add it to. And what we are going to do now is start also by creating hierarchies. So I don't want to put every class in the root of the public folder for the game mode or game instance that we created. That is fine. But now for the login stuff, I really want to create a subfolder login. So just type public under or after public/login. And then you can see under private login would be the CPP file and the public login, the H file. And now we just need to rename it. So we will call it login game mode. Create the class. I will pause here after it's compiled and added and writer is opened. Then we will have a look at it. So it's compiled. Writer is opening up in the background. So you can see now we have the MMO game instance in the root. It created a login folder, and in login we have login game mode. And if I move this over, you can see that the game mode was created. So we have under our MMO core plugin, we now have a folder called login, and you can see the gamemode.h and cpp files are in the respective login folder. We created the game mode. This we won't add code to this now, it's just a simple game mode, but we have a C++ class now that we might change things in the future. So it's always a good thing to have a C++ base class. So if usually you would create a blueprint class first and add stuff like variables and so on, and then want to create a C++ class, this is really complicated. It's a pain in the butt to change it. So in the end, it's always the best solution. Create a C++ class first, then a blueprint class on top of it, and so that you always have the option of adding stuff into C++ down the road, and might save you a lot of trouble later on. So let's get back to the project and create another class. So in the login folder, let's create new C++ class, select all classes, and now we are going to create the player controller class for the login, or the login player controller class that we need. But this one will be not from the standard player controller, but we will inherit from the OWS player controller class, because it has a lot of features that we then use for logging in, for creating the characters, and so much more. So let's select OWS player controller, and you can see it automatically put the login folder here because we created the C++ class in there. And instead of my OWS player controller, let's call it login player controller. Create a class. It finished it. Now we have the login game mode and login player controller in here. And in writer, you can see it also added it and the login player controller. And in the next videos, we will add code step by step during the course of Milestone 2, so that we can add the features and functionalities that we need for all the widgets and all that stuff to work correctly. So let's go back to Unreal. And the last thing that we are going to do here is create blueprint classes for them. So right click, new folder, under blueprints, let's create a login folder. And in here, we create a new blueprint class, select our login game mode and select it, call it BP underscore login game mode, and another blueprint class, let's search for login player controller, and we are selecting this one here and call it BP underscore login player controller. And then let's open up the game mode, and you can see here in the game mode we have all the classes that you can set. So it has the session, game state, the HUD, and we will, for the core classes, for in-game classes that we have later on, they will have special in-game player controller classes, in-game HUD, and so on. But for the login, we only need the player controller class. So under here, select the BP login player controller, save it, compile it. Let's close this. And now that we have it, we need to go into the world settings. And if you don't see the world settings here, what you can do is go under Window and select World Settings. Then this opens up. And what we can do now is, for this map, we can override the game mode to our BP login game mode. And then you can see under the selected game mode, we have our BP login player controller set. So this is basically it for this episode. And so something happened that sometimes happens and that you need to be aware of, and it's not bad. It's Unreal, and working with C++ classes can happen. So Unreal crashed. let's close without sending and open this up again. So the crash actually did more damage than I suspected or expected. It messed up the character blueprint, so the OWS character, and though that it still referenced the skeletal mesh and the other animation blueprint and so on from the old folders that it created, like the mannequin folder that was outside of Darkstar. And we moved it, as you remember, and it kind of messed up all of that. So I had to retarget the character animation, the skeleton, so that it worked again. And as you can see, also like the game mode override, everything didn't really save. So let's select BP login game mode, and the player controller is there. So let's save all, save selected. So if you close the project after you moved the characters and it saved everything, I tested it with another project and then it worked when I moved the mannequin folder into a different one, like we did in the beginning of the video, then it should work. If there are problems later on, I could make a video showing what to do, but usually you just have to see what errors there are. Maybe I can help you with them if there are errors, but somehow the crash was responsible, it seems, for messing this thing up here. But now it works again. So if you close Unreal after you move the stuff and assign when we open up the OWS character and select the mesh, and it had problem finding the SK mannequin, then you basically have to do like clear and select it again, and then he was able to find the real asset, and it looked like on the wrong directory. So this is what I had to change on the mesh. And then the animation blueprint itself had problems. If we open that up, it kind of like this third person idle run, it didn't work. The idle wasn't working, so I double clicked and it said, okay, it's referencing a wrong skeleton mesh. So you just have to say, okay, select the one he's offering and retarget. That should fix it. In case you get this problem that I had right now, so it might have been good that this happened, that we can figure this out, or in case it happens on your side. But it seems like the crash and that we didn't save. I think when we hit save all, then Unreal crashed. So in case this happens, then fix the characters, like assigning different meshes and stuff and the animation blueprint so that it works again. So this was the issue, and I had to recompile and try to fix that. So yeah. But anyways, I think that is the end for now for this video. So in the next video, we will continue creating the login dialog, the register dialog, and get this working. So I guess I'll see you in the next video.